So if there are no comments, I will start. Adama will start. So Adama, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. Okay. Can I go now?
Yeah, I just want to stop my screen. Have I stopped sharing it? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so now you share your
No.
screen now. I'm recording.
Okay. Okay. Please. Okay. This is. Can you all see now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So. Yes. Okay. Thank you for this brief introductory. Yeah. I'm Adam Abamba from Cote d'Ivoire, and I'm PhD student. For AYAB, I'm the representative of the Priority 3, which is investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. But like I'm from Cote d'Ivoire, so basically I'm a French native speaker. For those who are French, like French native, also they can ask question in French, and we try to like answer that question at the end of the presentation. Yeah. So like most of the people attending this webinar ask like who is AYAB or who are AYAB. So I just want to let you know that AYAB is like the establishment of AYAB is one of the key components of the program of action like of African Union Commission like for disaster risk reduction, and this is inspired by the priority 2, which is strengthening disaster risk reduction of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And it had been really influenced by youth. In fact, youth called for AU member states at the 6th session of African Regional Platform and the 5th high-level meeting on DRR in Mauritius in 2016. And member states declare and approve the constitution of AYAB in Tunis Declaration in October 2018. And then like African Union like go through a selection of member of AYAB, and then we have been established in May 2019. And our main focus is generally to advise AU members and relevant stakeholders on meaningful engage youth like in DRR process. That means like we advise AU members to give place to youth, and then as soon as we have place, we should be able to like to make input, to contribute, to review, to follow up the policy of DRR. Therefore, our second main focus is facilitate capacity building of youth, just to allow youth to be really relevant in terms of DRR in Africa. Then we should know that AYAB is like composed with 14 members. We have 14 members from 14 different countries across Africa. And then these members are like representing some priority, because AYAB have some priority. We have 5. The first one is understand disaster risk reduction, and we have one representative from South Africa who is like the responsible of this priority. And then we have the second one. The second priority is strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk reduction. The responsible of this is Sandra. And then the third one is investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and I'm the representative of this priority. And then we have the fourth one, which is enhance disaster preparedness for effective response to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction, which is like the representative of this priority is Joanne. She is from South Sudan. And then for AYAB, we have a third, like a fifth one priority, which is community action, because basically like the global framework has 4 priority, but for AYAB you have this one, which is community action, and the representative is from South Africa. And then after the representative of priority, we have representative from West Africa, and also we have some representative from Central Africa, and then from Southern Africa we have also 2 representatives, and we have also representative in East Africa and North Africa. And the representative of regional, like regional scope, region of Africa, the representation of region, they are around 9, and 9 plus like the 5 responsible of priority. It's make it 14 members for AYAB. And I want to highlight the fact that the gender is really balanced, because we have 7 female and 7 male, and the language generally is French and English. And we talk about how to join this board like later in this webinar. Then after giving this presentation of AYAB, we will, as we're talking about Africa, so we will give some key information about Africa. Africa has 55 countries and 5 geographic region, and we have like a population estimated at 1.2 billion people. And these all data are from the African Statistical Years book. So we're just giving that information, and you can have it also online also. So the youth proportion of in this population is more than 60%, and the population living in urban area is over 40%. And we have also like a percentage of female, which is for 50.1%, and the economic growth is 3.4%. And according to like ADB, like if we take around 10 countries in Africa, 7 countries are really vulnerable to climate change. And then, like after giving some key data about Africa, we will talk about disaster risk reduction. What is it? Like, I just want to remind you and us also what is really disaster risk reduction. So I will take this equation that stands for like to give equation like the risk equal hazard times exposure times vulnerability. So if you take the hazard, I will explain briefly what is hazard. So the hazard is a process or phenomenon or human activity that may cause loss of life, injury, or other life impact property, damage, social and economic disruption, on environmental degradation. That means the hazard can be natural or man-made. Then we have the exposure. The exposure generally is more about where the hazard is going to like where the hazard is going to be are going to strike. So it's generally the scope, the geographic scope that can be affected by the hazard. And then we have the vulnerability. The vulnerability is generally the condition determined by physical, social, and environmental factors or process which increase the susceptibility of an individual, a community, asset, or system to be impacted by the hazard. Like, it's generally, it will like talk about how are you going to be affected, because the way you are vulnerable, that can change the way you are going to be like affected by the hazard. If I want to take a brief example, like hazard can be like in this case of coronavirus, the hazard is generally the virus, and the exposure is generally the like people are like the country or the scope of like country that have been affected by the the coronavirus, and the vulnerability is, let's say, like our the vulnerability assessed by our like health system, like do we have a medicine for that, do we have a treatment, all that is taken into account in vulnerability. Yes. Then like what is disaster risk? Because like this is disaster risk is a potential loss of life, injury, destroy or damage asset which could occur to a system or community in specific period of time, and is probably a function of hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and capacity. What I said previously, like in like my explanation of the equation. Then like the disaster risk reduction is generally a concept and practice through systemic effort at preventing new and reducing existing disaster risk and managing residual risk, all of which contribute to strengthen resilience and therefore to achieve the sustainable development goals. And then after explaining what is disaster risk reduction, we have this cycle, which is generally the disaster risk management profile. I will try to briefly explain this cycle. Like as soon as we have a hazard, generally we have like 4 phases in disaster risk management. So if you have a hazard now, like we have the response. The response is more research, rescue, humanitarian aid. And then we have also the second phase, which is recovery. And the recovery start with damage assessment, rehabilitation, construction, reconstruction then. And after that, we have mitigation. And mitigation start with identifying the risk, then analysis the risk, and risk appraisal, and then land use planning. And then we have the preparedness. And preparedness is more a technical prevention, capacity building, emergency planning, and monitoring, and early warning system that can help to prevent the disaster. Then after explaining all this about disaster risk reduction, like I will give some key information about Africa, disaster profile of Africa. So we should know, like in Africa generally, we have hazard that are mostly hydrometeorological and climatological. That is generally drought, flood, wildfire, all those like hazard. And we should know that drought and flood together represent 80% of the loss of life and 70% of economic losses linked to natural hazard. And then we have also the vulnerability. The vulnerability is low capacity due to poverty. Africa has the world of population living under 1.90 dollars and $3.10 a day, and a high reliance on rainfall agriculture. We know generally in Africa we have like population and that's really like get money from agriculture. You know how the way our economy are based on agriculture. And then we have a limited like institutional capacity also. And then after that, like this show how these are some um, key data that like highlight the fact that flood flood generally affect economic causes, and then the droughts affect generally human causes, in fact. So in Africa, generally, like the flood generally has impact on economic, and then the drought generally impact like human, in fact. And then after that, we have also the exposure. We should know in Africa we are really exposed, in fact, because like our population grow quickly. We have the fastest population, the fastest growing population, and we have a rapid urbanization also. And that's generally is related to like our city are generally close to river, like coastal and all that. That's generally make us living like we have around 62% of African living in slums, in fact. And we have also the climate change that's can be really that affect Africa. In fact, we have the 6 warmest years on record in Africa. We have like in this 20 years, like last 20 years, and then we have an average of temperature which rose approximately 0.5 degree Celsius during the 20th century. Yeah. So like all that hazard risk and disaster risk reduction, all that is guided by two major framework in Africa. But we have a global one and we have one which is like for Africa. The global one is the Sendai framework with 7 targets. And then like you can see the global framework has 7 targets, and the first one is reduce global mortality, and the second one is also reducing people affected by disaster, and the third one is like reduce economic losses like by hazard, and also the fourth one is substantial reduce disaster damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of basic service. That's stand for like school, like hospital, yes, all that. And then we want to increase the number of countries with national and local DRR strategy. And we have also increased availability of access to multi-hazard early warning system in disaster, and also increase in international cooperation like for disaster risk reduction. These are the 7th target of the Sendai framework. We have also the program of action for the implementation of for disaster risk reduction in 20 from 2015 to 2030 in Africa. And this like program of action has 5 more targets, which is added to the 7 of the Sendai framework. The first one is strengthening coherence and integration between DRR, climate change adaptation, mitigation, ecosystem management, etc., to contribute to implementation and achievement of the Agenda 2063 and the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. And one of the like target also is strengthen long-term capacity, including coordination mechanism to build resilience. And then we have like this, like we have the fifth one, or the third one, which is strengthening mechanism, framework, and capacity for mainstreaming, implementing, and coordinating gender-sensitive DRR strategy and program. And we have also embed a holistic approach to systematically integrate a risk reduction measure into design, implementation of disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And the last one is develop practical tools and mobilize resources to contribute to the implementation of DRR program and project. All that, like the last 5, is added to the 7th target of the Sendai framework, which make like the program of action has like 12 targets. Then, like, what about youth in this process, in this DRR process in Africa? Like now, the Sendai framework, the global one, and the POA recognize children and youth as agents of change. That means like they are people relevant for solving and contributing to solve a challenge innovatively, and youth should be given the space to engage. And that means like government and stakeholders, relevant stakeholders should engage us in DRR discussion as it's our rights. And like we have also opportunity to contribute to disaster risk reduction. That means like stakeholder must give us a chance to contribute in DRR processes, and all that is based on law and like national practice, like strategy, and even like included in the educational system. In fact, yeah, and we have also like the meaningful engagement of youth in DRR process. What does it mean for us? Like meaningfully engage youth in DRR means like involve youth in policy formulation. That means that we have like we have to be involved to all processes that can be like relevant for us to make input in formulation of policy. And we have to be like at the place also of reviewing policy, and also we have to be called to like make input in the implementation of the policy for disaster risk reduction. And that's all is like based on consultation. Like when we have a consultation, we should be at the table also to make input, to give our viewpoint. And also we have also capacity building, because like if we don't have like really like a capacity to make input, how are we going to be really effective like in like all our youth action? So they should like build our capacity to like increase our competence to be really active in this process. And like we youth, we should like put word into action by making action trying to implement the policy of disaster risk reduction in Africa. Then I will let the floor to my dear colleague Sandra to follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adama. I wish I could speak French like the way you speak English, only not to say bonjour. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the first half.
Okay, thank you.
So I will
Yeah.
now share my screen. Just a moment. Yes, so welcome to the second half. I'm basically going to talk about African youth and DRR. So one thing we have to remember is that generally the UN defines young people as people up to the age of 24 years, but for Africa, the African Union defines it that people up to the age of 35. And this category of people, as Adam already mentioned, make up the majority of the composition of the population in Africa. However, young people have a lot of challenges, such as high persistent unemployment, there's a high incidence of chronic poverty, and weak institutions to support meaningful engagement in DRR. And generally, young Africans are seen as a homogeneous group in the DRR process. So because of that, the unique and collective capacities that we have to drive solutions are overlooked. Now, the thing is, when young people are meaningfully engaged in DRR, for the young person themselves, because they are involved in the process, there's a sense of ownership and a sense of pride in being part of such a process. So they are more involved, more committed to taking action to implement the policies. Also, when you meaningfully engage young people, there's an intergenerational and peer-to-peer learning opportunity, as well as professional development as well. It also makes young people active and seen among themselves and generally in the society as a valued stakeholder. For Africa, when you meaningfully, that is for the African Union and members of the African Union, that's the 55 member states, when they meaningfully engage young people, there's coherence and synergy in achieving the POA, which Adama has already explained is Africa's plan for reducing disaster risks, Agenda 2063, which is the continent's plan to sustainable development, and the SDGs, which are the goals or the plans that the world has to achieve global development, global sustainable development. However, for young people, for young people in Africa, there are a lot of barriers to they being meaningfully engaged in the DRR process. First of all the time, people are saying young people, children and youth are vulnerable, they are passive, that they are victims, which is true. But that redundant narrative makes them more passive actors in the DRR process. So when young people want to now take active action, they are not really considered as value stakeholders. Also, there's inadequate funding to support the initiatives that young people do. There's also inadequate institutional support to replicate their initiatives or to upscale it. There's also some form of poor political commitment among countries, which we all know. And also there's a general lack of knowledge and guidance in DRR processes as well. There's also inadequate information to support young people to be meaningfully engaged in DRR. Now, we would like to talk from an AYAB point of view, the possible ways we think that young people can overcome the barriers that I've just mentioned, and also our experiences that we've had so far. So from a policy perspective, the POA already exists. So what we can do is to help to review it, which means to check, to assess the POA, what is working, what is not working, what can be done, what can be made stronger. So generally, we do education and awareness of the POA, which we've done already, but we'll continue to do on our Twitter chat. We've also had a webinar about this. We also facilitate capacity building for people who want to know more about the POA. We'll be holding online consultations, and then we'll share relevant information and resources, which we do already. So our recommendation for young people who are engaged in DRR process is that we have an abundance of online tools that you can capitalize on to acquire knowledge so that you can be more knowledgeable in DRR processes, as well as hold online consultations, which do not necessarily incur a lot of financial or funding resources. Another thing that has worked for AYAB is using our digital and our online mediums. At the moment, what we can do is to provide and support online mediums. We are currently in the process of putting together our website, and when that website is ready, we will use that website to map youth-led activities and then youth-focused organizations as well, because there are some organizations that are youth-focused but are not led by young people. We also know that there's an abundance of youth professionals, but we don't have records of them as well, so we are going to map those as well. And we are also in discussion with UNESCO to develop an educational app that can teach young people about what the Sendai framework is, what the POA is, and the linkage to the SDGs. And will facilitate capacity building on this as well. So our recommendation is that when our website is ready, you can be able to upload anything that you are doing as a young person in the DRR process on it, so that you can get visibility for the work that you do. Because nobody would want to support you or to help you upskill if there is no evidence of something you have previously done. People are more moved when you have a record to show for what you can do. And so the next thing is to capitalize on social media. I just want to show you that, for example, this is the AYAB Facebook page. And as you can see, the page currently has over 1,000 people following it. Every Monday, we share an opportunity called Application Mondays that any young person, there are opportunities for young people to either apply to or to develop themselves on. So I would strongly encourage that every Monday, look for the hashtag Application Mondays to see what opportunity AYAB has found to share with you. And I also strongly encourage you to tag us in your activities, to follow, like, and share information on our page as well. We also have an Instagram page. This is how the interface looks like. We've taken a screenshot of one of the analytics to just show you the kind of dynamics that you can have with social media such as Instagram. I just want to say that the reason why we are showing the analytics to show you that when you post something online, it has far-reaching impact, and you can also be you can quantitatively see the impact of whatever it is that you post. We also have a Twitter page where we have an activity called Safe Saturdays every Saturday at 11 GMT. And as you can see, over the last 2 months, we've had over 66,000 engagements on our Twitter page. And so it shows that when you use mediums such as Twitter, you draw attention to the work we are already doing. And we are just demonstrating to you how our page currently works. So in regards to funding, I would like to, just in case you've not heard about it before, there's something called crowdfunding that is using the internet to raise funds for whatever project you are engaged in. What we can do as AYAB is we will facilitate capacity building and fundraising, and that kind of capacity building can be through webinars and Twitter chats. And we'll also share funding opportunities on our online and social media platform. So following these mediums are very, very important if you want to come across such opportunities. Also, we will continually share fundraising successes in other countries of young people who have successfully used a method to raise funds, just for you to learn and then contextualize it for whichever situation you find yourself in. Also, we just want to share with you that we are planning to have a disaster risk campaign in 5 countries in Africa, 1 in each regional economic committee, that is 1 in ECOWAS, 1 in East Africa, 1 in North Africa, 1 in Central Africa, and 1 in Southern Africa. The campaign will basically be focused on basic principles of disaster risk reduction, and then education and awareness about the POA, the Sendai framework, and the SDGs. And then we'll support young people to take action on DRR as well. Now, how we also encourage you that one way you can overcome the barriers is to form strategic partnerships. For example, we need you, the people on this call, the young people who are engaged in DRR, to partner with us We'll reach out to you once we get to know you. Those we already know, we're already in contact with them, but you can also reach out to us. However, it's always better to come to us with a plan because you know your needs, and when you come with a clear agenda, then we can have a conversation about how to make things happen. And our other partners are the African Union Commission. Well, they're not really our partner, like they are the parents, because it is their umbrella that we come under. We also work closely with the Region of Africa office. And then we have another group called the Africa Science and Technology Advisory Group, which also, like how we advise the African Union on young people, they advise the African Union on science and technology for DRR. We also liaise with the United Nations Media Group for Children and Youth, which is the official engagement platform for young people in DRR at the global level. So we do that we are liaising with them for coherence purposes. And then we also have a partnership with the IFRC, that's the International Federation of the Red Cross, and UNESCO Africa office. So in conclusion, if you don't remember anything at all from this webinar, you must remember these 5 things. That 1, Africa is ravaged by predominantly hydrometeorological and climatological disasters. That's the first thing that we can take away from this webinar. The second thing is that Africa has a plan to reduce disaster risk on the continent. And this is called the POA, which Adama has spoken about. This POA recognizes that children and youth are important stakeholders in the DRR process. The third thing you must remember is that young Africans face daunting barriers in being meaningfully engaged in DRR. So do not think that you are alone when you are having problems as a young person being engaged in DRR. The fourth thing you must remember is that AYAB was established to promote meaningful youth engagement in DRR. So that's already a step in the right direction because it recognizes that the African Union is meaning what it says, that young people are people that they want to work with. And also remember that there's so much potential for young people to be meaningfully engaged because of the opportunities that I just gave that young people can take to reduce, to overcome their barriers to engagement in DRR. So at the end of this webinar, I have some public service announcements that we have a calendar for having a webinar in AYAB, and we call that the ordinary webinars. So this is the first webinar for the year. It happens every quarter, and this is the first webinar. However, the next one will be in June. So please stay tuned on our social media pages to get information about that. And then, as I said, this one is an ordinary webinar, but we plan to have a special webinar. That's a webinar that we didn't originally plan because of the COVID-19. And that's because we recognize our role that we are supposed to share. I am supposed to share relevant and credible information to help reduce young people's risk to this COVID-19. And we are going to do that with the Center for Disease Control in Africa, which is under the African Union Commission. And also, we just want to tell you that we have our next Safe Saturday session is to mainstreaming youth in disaster risk governance. It will happen at 11 GMT next Saturday on the AYAB Twitter page. And also, if you want to reach out to us, our official email is info.ayabdr@africanunion.org. And our social media channels, we've already highlighted them. So follow us on these 3 channels. So at this point, I would pause for and check in the comment section the questions that we got from you that you would like AYAB to answer. The first question I can see here is, what are the requirements for membership? So, Africa Youth Advisory Board for Disaster Risk Reduction, which I have called AYAB, is a board that is under the African Union Commission. Now, how we were selected was, and that is how it's going to be. There's going to be an open call in 2021, because the mandate of AYAB, the tenure of AYAB is 2 years. So we used the first 6 months. That was, Adama mentioned, we came into force in May. But the thing is, because this board had never existed before, we needed time to set up the fundamentals of the board. So our mandate officially began in January 2020, and it will end in December 2021. So that means that in the last quarter of 2021, there would be an open call for young Africans to apply to be a member of the board. And the requirement would be that you are a young person up to the age of 35, or you are a youth-focused or a youth-led organization. And there will be more details in the expression of interest when that time comes. However, for you to be a member of AYAB, it's important that you must have engaged with us before getting to that time, because you can't just appear on the scene and want to be part of the board. So I would really encourage you to be actively involved in the work of AYAB, contribute, share stories, reach out to us when you have a capacity building. If you need our input for resources, just reach out to us. We would reach out to you. The important thing is to show that you are dedicated and committed to disaster risk reduction on the African continent. So even though we are a board that is fixed right now, to have potential to be a part of the board later, you must engage with us consistently and continually over the next 2 years. So yes, the PowerPoint presentation will be shared among the participants after this call. So, okay, I have answered that question. So I can see Kirsten from Drebel from the United States says he has several connections in Africa and would like to be involved in our work. How can I be useful to your organizations overseas? Well, AYAB is very interested in doing a lot of capacity building. So I would really encourage you that after this call, we have a bilateral meeting, and then we can take concrete steps to define capacity building on whichever aspects of disaster risk reduction that you are interested in. And then we can see how we can replicate it and upscale it in different countries. I am just checking the comment section. Okay, so I think if I haven't answered your call, your message, you can now raise up your hand and I can just give you the floor. Thank you so much, Kai. Kai is our representative, our head in disaster from the African Union, and we are so pleased to have him take part in this webinar. So thank you very much, Kai, and stay safe as well and take care. Okay, Isabel. Yeah, Isabel Shafik, you have the floor.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I am from Uganda, and thank you for the session. It was really powerful. I had a great time. So, we education in the Coalition of Uganda, and one of the challenges we've been having, or one of the suggestions that were suggested, is having that session of disaster risk reduce. Yeah. How
Okay.
can people manage? How can young people, the children in school, or even university, manage on a disaster risk reduce in case of a disaster? So one of my call is basically to understand how you guys can partner with us and see how you can train us in better in that section before before we go to the open, because we need to produce this, we need to present this to the parliament. But without basic information or basic trainings in that sector, that is where we limited to. So is there
Okay.
any chance how we can partner with AYAB here in Uganda to see how we can broaden up DRR and it's introduced in that curriculum?
Okay. Thank you very much. We have a representative from Uganda on AYAP. His name is Abel Walenkwa Wilson. And so I think the way I think about it, I think you need training on media in DRR, and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, their Region of Africa office, recently held a training on that in Tanzania. So I would
Okay.
Abel would take charge of this, and he would reach out to the UN office for further information. Then he would have a bilateral review so that we can
Okay.
see how we can take this off the ground.
Okay. So how best can I connect with you, please? I need to understand how I can connect to
Yes,
Abel and
so
other people.
please send an email to info.ayabdrr, the
Okay.
email that you got the link for the webinar from, with this same request, and
Uh,
we'll put you in touch with the right person so that we can see how best we can organize a training on this for you and the young people you are engaged with.
okay.
And any other questions from the participants? Okay. Um, Thank you. Then, thank you so much. Then, oh, I'd like to also acknowledge Soichiro from UNESCO. UNESCO is one of our very strong partners, and we are very happy about the kind of support that they want to give us. And we just want to say hello, Soichiro. Thank you so much for joining. We know it's quite late in Paris by now, but you took time off to join this webinar, so thank you. And okay, so it looks like we don't have the representative from Central Africa. We have two. They are, I think, Constance is on this call. So I would like you, Isa Divine Foricia, to send an email to info.ayapdr, the email that has the link to the webinar, and then we can directly link you to Constance, and then the two of you can have a bilateral conversation about how the two of you can work together for DRR. So, without any more questions, we just want to wish everybody a safe evening. Please stay safe. Practice the 3 recommendations recommendations that are given by the WHO and the African Center for Disease Control. That first of all, wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Secondly, use hand sanitizers, and three, practice social distancing. That's one sure way of reducing your risk to the current situation we are facing with COVID-19. Thank you so much for your time, and we will share the recording of this webinar, as well as a link for evaluating the webinar. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening. Take care. Bye.
Photo